Getting to know us, getting to know all about us.
So who are you and how long have you been gaming?
My name is Frank. I'm married to Cheryl, and I have been into video games since, I want to say, 1978 when I first played Atari. So I guess that's 40 years worth of gaming. I've been into gaming for 40 years. Still see these gray sideburns? That's from too many late nights of gaming.
My name is Cheryl, and I'm married to Frank, and I've been into video gaming since the 1980s.
My name's Bart, and I've been gaming since, as far as I can remember, somewhere around probably 7 or 8 years old.
What was your first gaming memory?
Playing Dungeons of Daggerath on the TRS-80 color computer.
And my first gaming memory would be Richard's Pub down on Route 28 in South Middleborough, which is now Fish's Pub. Richard's Pub had cocktail table Donkey Kong and cocktail table Pac-Man. And they might have had Galaxian too at one point, but those were definitely the first ones for me. And actually, the Assonet Inn had an upright Centipede game. So both of those would be pretty close to the first time that I was getting mental over bugging my parents for quarters to go and play games while waiting for food.
My first gaming memory was Christmas at my grandmother's house, 1977. My uncle got his Atari and brought it over to my grandmother's for Christmas, and I was blown away by combat. I think that's all he had. There might have been one more. Maybe it was just combat though, but I remember playing it all night long and wanting one every second until it was almost a year later before we got ours.
What was your first video game system?
So my first game system would have been an Atari 2600. When that first came out, it was the year everybody got them, pretty much. And we had, obviously it came with Combat and Space Invaders. And I think the first game that we actually got that we went out and bought would have been Asteroids.
And in 1978, we got our first Atari 2600. My very first gaming system. Technically it was mine and my sister's, but it was mine. Still mine.
My first gaming system was actually the TRS-80 color computer. The first one I owned. Maybe not the first one I played, but the first one I owned.
Intellivision or ColecoVision?
Intellivision or ColecoVision?
Intellivision or ColecoVision?
What kind of question is that?
I'm sorry.
Intellivision or ColecoVision?
She asked you that already?
What kind of question is that? Well, for me personally, I love ColecoVision. That was another one that a couple of years after my uncle got his Atari for Christmas, he showed up at Christmas with a ColecoVision. And yes, again, blown away by the graphics, the quality of the games. But personally, I didn't have one until much later in life. I was very envious and really wanted one. A good friend of mine at the end of my street growing up had an Intellivision, and so we used to play that a lot. Now, I don't want to say that Intellivision is better. I just want to say, personally, I had a lot more experience with Intellivision, but I do really love and appreciate ColecoVision. It's a very hard one to pick, but I'm going to lean a little bit towards Intellivision just for my own personal playing experience.
For the Intellivision versus ColecoVision question, I've only played ColecoVision a couple times with Frank and never before that, so I guess I would have to say I have more experience with Intellivision, but I liked ColecoVision the few times that I did play it.
I would definitely have to go with ColecoVision over Intellivision, mainly because I really didn't have that much exposure to Intellivision. I knew one person that had one. I remember playing boxing on it, which was horrible. Boxing was awful on every system. You know, the upright, all you can see is the arms and the head, and there was always one kid that was good at it and everybody else was no good, and that's just the way it was. So I would definitely say ColecoVision because there were so many options as far as games go. I think the graphics were better overall.
Who would win in a fight, Nintendo or Sega?
Wow, that's a tough question. I don't think I can pick. I know my husband is a Nintendo fanboy.
Sega.
I can't say I'm that Sega fangirl, but I love Sega Genesis games. I love NES games. I think I would have to say that Sega and Nintendo are pretty much tied in my book. That I like them both, and I will always like them both, and I will always want to play them both.
Sega and Nintendo is a tough one because there's a special place in my heart for both of them, and I think overall Sega's graphics, when you compare them to what Nintendo was putting out, Sega was way better. I think of Ghouls and Ghosts, and I'm like, well, that's about as good as you're going to get on a home system for that time period. It was so good. Anyway, I like them both. What are you going to do? It's tough if you had to pick one of them. It's tough.
So Sega or Nintendo? Another one. How are you supposed to answer this? Yes, I suppose you could call me a bit of a Nintendo fanboy.
My husband is a Nintendo fanboy.
Sega. Although we do have almost twice as many Sega Genesis cartridges. I love Genesis, but Nintendo, I'm going to go with Nintendo over Sega.
If you could say you could have the entire catalog and the system, I think my time would be much more occupied with Nintendo than it would be with Sega. But at the same time, the quality of the games and stuff like that on Sega, I think, was a little bit better. But I don't know. I find myself playing Jaws Revenge, which is a horrible game on Nintendo, but you know what? I like it. It's fun. Dumb, but it's fun. I like it.
What are your top 5 arcade games?
What are my top 5 arcade games? Rampage. Any version of Rampage. It was just a good game. You could play that game for a long time on not too many quarters, and it was very rewarding to smash people and eat buildings, step on tanks and cruisers and all that stuff. So Rampage is up there on the list. Another one is Outrun, Sega's Outrun. The sit-down version of Sega Outrun, I was blown away. The machine moved all over the place. It was great. Another one I have to play when I go into an arcade is Galaga. I loved it. Still love it. Another one for me would, of course, be Donkey Kong. That was a game always. The restaurant up the street from me growing up as a little kid used to have a Donkey Kong cocktail table. So I would play that one quite a bit anytime we went to get pizzas. that was the game to play. So yeah, Donkey Kong is on the list. And another one in the top 5, maybe a weird one, but to me, Tron. You had 4 different games in there. You had awesome light-up cabinet, light-up controller. You know, the game looked cool. You see it from across the arcade, and it just looked like something you wanted to play. And the little games that were in the game were fun too. So there's my top 5.
I would say my top 5 arcade games, or at least the ones that I spent the most quarters on in my lifetime and played the most, would have to be Centipede, Millipede, Robotron, Ms. Pac-Man, and Gauntlet. Those are the ones that I spent the most money on and probably got the most enjoyment from in my days in the arcades. Miss it.
As far as 5 favorite games, I mean, in no particular order, just because it's really tough to say what's your favorite band. I mean, can you really say there's one ultimate game that if above all others, if you could only play one game forever? I don't know if I can make that choice, to be totally honest with you, but obviously Donkey Kong is a huge one. There's no doubt about that. For arcade games, Gorf was huge. I loved that game. The 4 different screens were awesome. That was another one. Is Alien Syndrome is in this list too, where it had a really unique joystick, so it was just different from the other things. Actually, Gorf has a joystick like Tron. Those are the only 2 arcade games that I know that have that particular joystick originally. I'm sure there are other ones now, but anyway. So Donkey Kong, Gorf, Alien Syndrome, the crossbow game from Exidy, which is really basic, but I loved that game. That game was so good. And actually they have that at Fun Spot, which we've been to and played, and it was great. And then I would have to say Dragon's Lair. You know, those are probably the top 5 arcade games that, in my mind, if they were there, those were the ones that I was really playing. You know, probably above all others. And it was tough too, because Dragon's Lair, as much as you like, was more. All these other games were quarters, period, whereas Dragon's Lair was 50 cents, and then a quarter to continue. So that was a big deal back then. In the grand scheme of things, so that would probably be on the bottom if I ranked them, but it was just cool because the subject matter was really cool, and obviously the graphics were groundbreaking at the time. Even though Space Ace is cool and Dragon's Lair 2 are cool, but they're not as good as the original, obviously. I mean, entertaining. Anyway.
What are your top 5 games of all time?
Ms. Pac-Man, always a lot of fun, just chomping. Any of the Gauntlet games, I really enjoy playing those games, and I've always enjoyed them. A lot of fun for me. Quite a few of the Super Mario Brothers games as well. Mario Kart, I've always liked Mario Kart. The simple games make me happy as well, though. Millipede and Centipede, just, killing a bunch of mushrooms, killing a bunch of centipedes. It's a simple, mindless game that transports you to a time when nothing matters except having fun, and these are why I like these games.
As far as 5 games, just across the board, regardless of system, etc., like that, I think of games that back in the day, and even today, what games I would play the most and enjoyed the most, regardless of what system I was playing them on or whatever. Although obviously now, with a modded Xbox from Frank, I can play them on every system. 5 games across the board. Ghouls and Ghosts on Sega Genesis is an all-time favorite, which, to be honest with you, I've never played in the arcade. I don't think I've ever saw that game in the arcade. However, I've played it on the modded Xbox in the arcade, and Sega Genesis is really, really close, but I was playing it for years and years on Sega Genesis, and I absolutely love that game. And obviously for those of you who the first time played it without playing it on the non-practice mode and got to the end and just could never go any further, I got mad. Yeah, you go right to professional and then you have to go back anyways and start all over again. But once you get that special weapon, it's pretty good. But that's definitely right up there. Another game that I play all the time now, I probably played this as much as anything in the last year or so with the modded Xbox, is Spider-Man the video game, which I played in Ann and Hope in Dartmouth with a friend of mine for like 4 hours. And it was the game where you can be Spider-Man, Namor, the Submariner, out of water, obviously, Black Cat, or Hawkeye. Anyway, awesome game. The game is so good. Every bad guy's in it. It's fun. I love that game. The entire Super Mario lineup, I don't see how that couldn't be on any gamer's list in the grand scheme of things. Mine in particular would probably be Super Mario 3 on regular Nintendo. And granted, now on Wii, they've gone above and beyond. It's awesome. But I look at time spent playing and how excited I was to go and rent that cartridge. It was definitely Super Mario 3. Keystone Capers on the Atari 2600. I loved that game, and it was really not that difficult. I mean, yeah, it got harder as you went, but there was a pretty simple pattern that you could follow, and as long as you didn't get hung up on one of the first 2 levels, you didn't have any problem catching the guy. But I played that game for hours and hours. And Pitfall on Atari, both of them were Activision games that were phenomenal. I mean, I played for hours and hours.
My top 5 games of all time. Love to play Millipede. Cheryl and I go up to the game room, and pretty much before we do anything else, we play Millipede for a few rounds. And it's just a relaxing, comfortable, great way to start off a night of gaming. So Millipede is right up there in my top 5. Another game I spent a lot of years with, and there's a few guys out there that may see this that sat there beside me and played this game for years too, is Cruisin' World on the Nintendo 64. For a long time, I probably only had 10 and 64 games, and Cruisin' World lived in the console for years on end, and we played it for hours on end.
Played that game for hours and hours.
Day after day, Cruisin' World. Great game. I'm going to say any of the Super Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers 2, or Super Mario Brothers 3. I'm sure most people would say Super Mario Bros. 3 is the best game there is, and I'm not going to say it's a bad game. It's a great game. But I could sit down with any of the Super Mario Brothers and have just as much fun. They're all a blast. They bring me right back to that time as a little kid, and they're great games, done very well. Another one in the top 5 is Contra. Contra on the NES. Yes, playing with the code to learn how to play the game and beat the game, and then beating the game with no code. Awesome game. Had a lot of fun. I've gone through it. Cheryl and I have beat it together. My brother and I have beat it together. Bart and I have beat it together. It's just a great game. You can go back to that one anytime and play it. The last one on my top 5 favorite games of all time, Super Mario Bros. 64. What a great game. You have tons and tons of levels. You have all these different quests, different mini games in there. There's so much to do in that game. It's a blast. When Nintendo 64 came out and that came out, I had seen nothing like it. And there are so many games that to this day still model themselves after Mario 64. Mario 64.
What game makes you mad?
So the game that's been making me mad lately or at least most recently, is Ori and the Blind Forest for Xbox One. The game plays well. I love the game. Beautiful quality graphics and immersive environments. But I get stuck and I can't get any further, and that makes me so mad. I want to continue on and explore, but I get stuck, and then I can't go any farther, and I throw my controller on the table in disgust and move on to something else. So right now, that's the game that is currently making me mad.
So as far as games that aggravate me, don't make me very happy, and obviously every system has got its doozies, but the ones that come to mind for me, any of the Sword Quest games on the Atari system, they're just bad.
Play that without the book.
Yeah, and the comics that came with them, it's just not a good thing. And actually, there's a whole angry video game nerd show on those where he talked about how they were giving away awards, and they never even finished the contest or anything because people gave up. It was just terrible. So I really don't like those. We were actually just up in the room, and I saw a 720-degree cartridge for Nintendo. I hated that game. And it's not the concept. I used to skateboard and everything, but I could not skateboard in the video game. It was just terrible. I didn't like it. It was bad. So I don't like that game. Qbert. I loved Qbert, and I could watch people play it, and it was a cool game, but I just could not play Qbert. I always off the edge, and so as a result, I didn't like it. And that was on any system. It didn't matter. I just couldn't play that game. Zaxxon was another one that I really liked as far as the concept of it, but to the 3D thing, I didn't like it. I would never play that game because I'd always crash into the wall instead of being able to go through the hole because I wasn't paying attention to the size of the shadow and how close. Anyway, I didn't like it.
The game that has made me mad lately, anyway. Super Meat Boy on the Xbox One. Great game. Simple game. Should be a simple game. You got one little dude. You jump over this spinning saw blade. You jump over this barrel. You on to the next level. Yeah, right. It's a fun game. It's a great game. But the levels take about 10 seconds to go through, and you can fly through them. And if you can't, it'll take forever. Yes, Super Meat Boy has made me very mad. I haven't been back to it for a couple of months now because I didn't want to ruin my Xbox One controller.
What games make you feel good?
I hate to even admit that I've probably played Jaws Revenge for, I don't know, 10 hours just to beat it. And most people would be like, that game is terrible. And you are wasting your time playing it, but whatever, it was fun. I don't know if I'd say it. It's obviously not my top 5, but it's like,
you're gonna need a bigger boat.
The guy, I don't know who his name was, but one of the guys in the Atari documentary talked about how he would rather play some of these lousy games like E.T. Than some of the new games, just because, they are so advanced and there's so much more involvement rather than a simple joystick and a button. But something about it.
What games make me feel good? Too many to list. But an awesome one on my list, and maybe because it's one of Cheryl and I's favorites, is Miss Pac-Man. And we go up to the room. You could have a long, terrible day at work, a long, terrible week, and you put in Miss Pac-Man and you start cranking through those levels on co-op mode, on the board set to mini, and with the speed boost going, it is so much fun. And you get the end screen, you can actually beat Miss Pac-Man. I don't know how many people actually know that, but Shell and I have beat it many times, and it is a very rewarding game to beat, very fun game to beat. Miss Pac-Man makes me happy. After a long, crappy day, what do you want to come home and play to feel better?
There are many, many games that make me feel good. almost every video game makes me feel good, and just the act of playing video games makes me feel wonderful. It brings back all kinds of childhood joy, all kinds of childlike enthusiasm, lack of responsibility. It transports me back to a time when I had no cares, and I love playing video games.
What other hobbies besides video games do you enjoy doing?
I enjoy many hobbies. Video gaming is just one of the many that I do enjoy. But I also enjoy gardening. I enjoy decorating. I enjoy painting. I enjoy creating and designing. Just about anything. You name it. I love to make things. I love to create. And in that respect, I'm very much like my husband, who is one of the most talented and creative people I know. I love being creative, and I love being creative with him.
I've always been artistic, done many things, airbrushing, I was a tattoo artist. I play drums, I play bass, I play piano and keyboards and sing. And other hobbies include, did I mention video games? Video game collecting and hunting for video games, and how much I love when Cheryl and I go out on the hunt and we spend a Saturday driving around to different junk stores and antique stores and yard sales, and we come back with a back seat full of video game goodness and all kinds of cool things. That is a hobby I really like. Even if it's not collecting video games, being out on the hunt to find fun things with my wife is one of my favorite things to do.
I mean, video games are, I got spare time, that's usually what I'm doing. But I do a little coin collecting. I used to collect comic books, I don't do much anymore, but I'm still into the whole thing. You know, I find myself online looking at comic books, you know, for sale and what's going on, even though I'm not readily collecting them right now. I'm just into that stuff. I used to do a lot of target shooting, but it's a time thing. Gave up scuba diving. Last time I benched 500 it's been quite a few years, so I got out of that. The roids were killing me.
What are you most excited about for upcoming episodes?
Upcoming episodes, we've got lots of things in the works. There's lots of plans. There's going to be some mysteries solved. There's going to be some spooky things going on. There's going to be some funny things going on. There's going to be some gameplay happening. There's going to be some...
Yes, you promised me game room therapy.
Game room therapy is coming. Game room breakdown is coming, which is basically a continuation of the tour. In episode 2, we did the game room build, which was basically the beginning of the tour. That starts out with the room, the shelving that we built, put it together, the different TVs in and out of there, the mess like that. And since the room is never going to be done, it keeps changing. We're going to go into detail on certain sections of the room, where this is our NES stuff, or this is our N64 stuff. These are the systems we play all the time, stuff like that. Yeah.
Awesome. The room has definitely taken on a life of its own now, I think.
We have built.
And it seems to like being changed up every so often. And
it does.
the variety.
It sort of has a
exciting.
pulse of its own, and
Right?
these things changing is just its way of rolling over in the night, I guess.
Right.
What game makes you mad? Throw the controller, scream into a pillow, have your parents basically say, "Time to shut it off!" from the other room. My brother's was Metroid.